Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today for our Engineering and Operations Management Lunch and Learn webinar series at the University of Arkansas. This is being hosted by the College of Engineering and Industrial Engineering programs. We offer a Master of Science in Operations Management, Engineering Management, and Engineering. We also have graduate certificates that include project management, Lean Six Sigma, and Homeland Security. And I will explain a little bit more about those at the end of the presentation, but let's get right into it. Welcome, everybody. My name is Karin Hickenbotham. I'm the program manager for MSOM. We ask that you're going to save all the questions until the end of the presentation. We will be utilizing the chat box for you to ask any follow-up questions or clarification for our presenter today. And this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on ScholarWorks at UARK in our Operations Management collection of presentations. So again, thank you for joining us and let's go ahead and get started. Today we are having a presentation on benefit realization management. Do your projects support your strategy? And today's presenter is Phil Jones, one of our MSOM instructors. Phil joined the program as an adjunct professor in 2012 and currently teaches strategic management, project management for operations managers, and advanced project management. Phil's work career includes serving in various roles for 25 years in mining and heavy industrial manufacturing, and for the past 12 years, Phil has worked in the engineering and construction industry in project management and business development roles. So without further ado, Phil, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation.
Thank you, Karin, very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're having a really good Wednesday, and I'm looking forward to our time together today. Here are my objectives for our time together today, to walk through business realization management and we'll walk out of this with this understanding, these objectives met today. So just understanding what this concept is. We'll look at this at really kind of a high level because every organization can apply this differently inside of a common framework. So looking at a overarching framework today, looking at kind of an outline format, and then helping you to evaluate and apply BRM to your organization, to your strategy, and to your projects. When we're all said and done, also want to be able to answer these questions, be able to define what BRM is, then understand the keys to successfully implementing this process. Then also look at the end of the presentation on things, barriers that could make BRM not effective in your organization. So here's where this starts for me. Found this quotation in some of the PMI literature, Project Management Institute. So just for definitions today, I'll use PMI frequently. And again, that's referring to the Project Management Institute content. Then I'll probably just use BRM for this concept today. And so found this in doing some research for this topic. I got interested in this quite some time ago, thinking back in my work career and some of the projects that I've seen done at the places I worked that really made no sense whatsoever. I think back to one when I worked for Alcoa in Central Arkansas at their big industrial manufacturing facility, and was part of the sales group at that point in time. This is in the late 80s in a booming economy. And Alcoa at that location produced refractory aluminum materials for the steel and other industries. And things were selling like crazy. We could not really keep up with demand. And Alcoa's sales management decided to create this system they called Vision. And the idea was this system that will allow our customers to log in and look at our inventory and lab analysis results for our products. We all kind of rolled our eyes because what we needed at that point in time was not a new system. We needed some additional production capacity. This project cost $1.1 million in 2021 dollars. So again, we were very, I won't say demoralized, that's kind of a big word, but again, really questioned our leadership in the company on devoting resources and money and time to a project that really did not make sense to us who are on the ground floor. They're on the front lines trying to serve our customers. So this in some way sparked my interest in this concept. So you see this statement here from someone who manages projects at Mater Health Services. The idea of really there is no logic if a project does not fit the organization. So a basic definition of BRM is that it aligns projects to a company's overarching strategies. And really it is just that simple in definition. The background of BRM comes from the late 1960s in a concept called the logical framework approach. And that was developed by the U.S. Agency for International Development. And their work was to help underserved, underdeveloped countries develop infrastructure, water supply, things like that to advance their civilization in those countries. So the framework developed by that organization was goal, purpose, outputs, and activities. So the idea was that a goal was established, defined, a purpose for doing that project, the output desired from that project, and then how to get that project done. So from that has evolved BRM. Like so many things these days that are both strategy and project management related, BRM has been heavily influenced and informed by software development as well, but now really applies to almost any type project, whether it be heavy industrial, still software, apps, those kind of things, really almost anything in an organization that wants to advance and grow forward can use BRM. What what BRM does, it forces us, really, it provides some discipline. We tend to look at projects, especially as project managers. We are so focused on time, scope, and budget that we tend to lose sight of everything else. A lot of that is just by necessity because our project owners, our stakeholders, our sponsors, they're concerned about how much it costs and when it gets done and what the end product is. But what BRM does is that also adds, I guess you'd say, maybe a layer or a framework to our projects that also gives us perspective and feedback on if that project is really meeting that company's ultimate strategic objectives. This might help you understand where we're going with this part of the presentation today. So kind of a model here to look at how this flows. So this is always, always, always strategy driven. So strategic objectives of that organization should identify when done properly, the required project outcomes and outputs. So output is the target result of a project, and the value is the value generated for that organization, that firm, by that project. So that in turn guides those 5 steps using the PMI Project Management Process Model Group. That guides those steps in that project development, initiation, planning, execution, and so on. When done properly, then the outcome and the output of that project should accomplish that firm's strategic objectives. I think it helps to think about some definitions. So the first one is, what is a project? And I find sometimes that people confuse projects with production. So a project is, as the definition says right here, this is from PMI, a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. The difference is, of course, that production is ongoing. It just goes on and on and on. But a project is some slice of time. We do something intentionally to create something unique of value, the desired outcome to, in this case, to meet our strategic goals. So what is strategy? A lot of definitions we can find for strategy. And so this is one that I use from a textbook that I used back in my MBA coursework. And I think it's a good starting definition. So you see it here. Strategy is the set of decisions, commitments, and actions that lead to a competitive advantage. Now, also, when I work with students in strategic management courses that I teach, also I do some consulting in strategy for other organizations. I find there is sometimes a misunderstanding or misapplication about what strategy is and what strategy is not. So here's some things strategy is not, just again to provide us a good place to start off from today, a good foundation. So strategy is not mission or vision statements. Now I will say that good mission and vision statements should be an output of a good strategic management process, but they are not the same as the strategy itself. They may communicate strategy, they may affirm strategy, but they're not the strategy itself. Goals and or objectives are not strategy. Strategy supports goals or objectives of the firm or organization. Then I also hear people use strategy and tactics interchangeably. They're not the same, at least the way I look at these. Tactics are those specific, detailed actions that support strategy. So when I talk about strategy today, I'm talking about those things that we do that help us create a competitive advantage for our organization or our firm or our company. Now, here's where really I think the breakdown begins in identifying the right projects for an organization. I think that sometimes we forget what should drive the decision to start a project. And I'm going to say that to begin the BRM process, that those involved, and we'll discuss more in a moment, but we'll talk about the stakeholders being C-level folks, the business unit managers, and the project managers involved in the project. They should be involved in the conversation. And that first question that should be asked and considered and wrestled with is, will this project create value for this organization? Because remember, by definition, the objective of strategic management is to maximize the value of organization. You're always trying to position your organization in a place that has a competitive advantage. So the first question again is, will this project help position us for a competitive advantage by creating value? So now implementing BRM. So I also reference today occasionally the Boston Consulting Group. They've done quite a bit of research working with PMI on implementing and using and the results of BRM. So some of their research has indicated that having informed senior leaders are supportive senior leaders. And in organizations where BRM is effective, that C-leader leadership, they're involved, they receive timely information about project execution. They're just heavily involved in this. And you've probably been involved in other initiatives in your organization, whatever that might look like, whatever that might be. And you probably know from experience that unless the senior level managers, either business unit and even corporate level folks, are behind this or involved in it, at some point in time, it will run out of energy, run out of steam. So having senior level folks behind this is an important next step in BRM process. There needs to be a dedicated space, just a safe, good, intentional, methodical, you pick the right word for you, but this needs to be a discipline, maybe it's the best word to use, for dialogue between the C-suite, business unit owners or presidents, and project managers. This should look like active engagement. And again, research indicates that in the BRM process, the greatest predictor of success in this process is having this dedicated space for dialogue between all the stakeholders that should be involved in this process. This should be ongoing. It's not a one and done. This needs to be a regular, you pick the time that works best for you. Is it once a week, bi-weekly? Is it once a month? But some regular interval where everybody comes back together and has this conversation keep on going. And also, again, research indicates that this this idea, this concept of a dedicated space for dialogue, this will also cascade down in the organization, even apart from the project management environment, and can improve communication throughout the organization just because the organization sees those involved in this involved and communicating with each other. So direct and indirect benefits both in the BRM process. Again, Boston Consulting Group doing some research on this. If you look at this graph, and hopefully you can see it well enough, these are the factors identified as being the most important to the success of BRM and having business owner involvement and support in the BRM process. And notice that two of the top three predictors here are business owner involvement and executive management involvement. So again, this, I think, provides emphasis to the point that there has to be a group of stakeholders committed, involved, and active participants in the BRM process. The reason they have the project manager involved in the earliest conversations is to give them understanding of the project. Since the project manager is the one who's responsible for building the project, the initiation, the planning phases, when they understand the purpose of the project, they can better develop that project plan, has a better chance of meeting that project objectives and deliver that value. Again, I've been in organizations to where the PM was the last person what's going on. So BRM tells us to get everyone involved early. Again, the C-suite, business unit level folks, and the selected project manager, project management team involved early on in those conversations, having everyone understand the reason for that project. Related to one of the earlier slides, those conversations should quickly include talk about what are the end results desired in this project. What do we hope to accomplish? What's the output, and what's the value derived from this project? Another question to ask is, why are we considering this project? And I think in practice, this helps to focus the entire stakeholder team on the project and its purpose, its reason, its viability. This also, again, because there are other research, we'll look at balanced scorecards later on in this presentation. The balanced scorecard concept was developed back in the early 1990s because there was clearly too much emphasis on just financial measures in organizations. So what this conversation does, it helps the stakeholder team avoid just focusing on just the cost, because there's always those folks who say, well, this will cost too much. We can't do this. So these conversations help move the stakeholder team past that and help the stakeholder team then begin to look and identify the output, the outcome, the value generated by that project. And again, does it support that organization's strategic objectives? This also could and maybe even sometimes should result in killing a project. Maybe these conversations, these questions that are being asked make the team realize this project does not really fit our strategy. Let's just kill it. But in that process, it is not uncommon that another project that would be consistent with strategy evolves from those conversations. So this can be a very powerful part of this process. So beginning a conversation, thinking about the end results. Another key step in implementing BRM is to use a pilot test approach and start this implementation incrementally. The idea here is that you want to maximize success of BRM early. The idea is to pick something that would really probably be a great fit for using BRM. That will be a project that has a high chance of being successful anyway, honestly. apply BRM, make it be successful, make the project show its value, have the desired outcome, and this will generate further support of BRM. It will help build support both inside that stakeholder group, but also outside in other organizations inside that company that see this being used successfully, and thus builds momentum for using BRM and adopting it organizationally wide. Um, this is called a value driver map. So those of you who have a good project management background, you're aware of a tool called the work breakdown structure, which simply, not simply, which takes a proposed project and breaks it down to deliverables in a hierarchical or a different level type manner. What the value driver map does is something similar. It takes those activities that could generate value to that business, that organization, and breaks those down in a way that makes it easier to identify potential projects then to consider, to adopt or reject, that would, again, once they're completed, would generate the value desired to move strategy forward. This is a way to decompose those value drivers into a way that, again, makes it easier to identify the potential project, and then even take one of these and go deeper and break it down into specific objectives or measures or plans or activities in a project. Another way to look at this is called the value chain. This is something that I used, or we used, in Walton College of Business in the MBA program. This is not the same as the supply chain, not at all. This is called the value chain. What the value chain does is disaggregate a firm into relevant activities strategically to understand areas in the organization to where the firm either is underperforming and not deriving full value, or a place that could be used to derive even more value. Not all organizations have all of these activities. So across the bottom, going from left to right, those are called primary activities. And then in the upper left there, those are called supporting activities. So again, not every firm has all of these. I would say you probably recognize quickly, looking at this, that large retail firms, large manufacturing firms would have all of these going on, but maybe smaller service firms like construction, like engineering, will not have all of these. But every firm, every organization will have some of these. So another approach to identifying potential projects is to use this to do an internal analysis of your organization, and then look at where, again, you're either under delivering value in some activity in your organization. It might be inbound logistics, it could be human resource management, it could be procurement, it could be R&D, whatever. Or again, maybe you're doing pretty good, but can focus on one of those even further and derive even more value out of that part of your value chain. So value driver map and value chain are great ways to begin to look at ways to identify potential projects that could then be managed under the BRM umbrella. Another huge step in this is selecting the right project managers. PMI research back in 2016 provides some focus on the fact that building the critical skill set of the project manager, and that would include the technical skills, such as being able to use the PMI project management group well, the initiation, the planning tools, executing well, Microsoft Project or other software, all those things. Those are important. Leadership's important also, those skills. And then one that's probably overlooked some, in my opinion, and based on my experience, is helping the PM to understand the business strategy. Why are we doing this? Which is, again, one of the outcomes of a good BRM process. So the PMI research from 5 years ago says that when the project manager has those critical skills, again, technical, leadership, and business strategy skills, that um, the results of that are that 40% more projects that are done meet the outcome goals when they're led by a project manager who has those critical skills. The PMO, the Project Management Office, you may know that is an organization that's housed inside the overall company, inside the firm. And the PMO is a dedicated project management group, and all they do is manage projects. Again, there is research by PMI, other organizations that tell us that when people do nothing but run projects, and this of course makes complete common sense, do nothing but run projects, they get better at doing that. One of the mistakes that organizations make, I saw it when I worked at Alcoa, for example, was to take someone whose function was something besides pure project management and make them a project manager for a specific project, and then put them back out in the field again or back in the plant again, doing their regular job. And some projects failed because of that, some succeeded. But the idea is to have people who are dedicated expert project managers running the project. So one of the things to look at is a PMO needed in that organization to run these projects and to make BRM successful? If the answer to that is yes, if the answer to do we have the right skill sets, no, then that might mean there needs to be a change in human resource management strategy and how the human resource function in that organization looks at their talent evaluation and onboarding processes, and maybe changes that to acquire better skills in the project management resources. Establish the right conditions are important also. One of my favorite quotations that I use frequently when I teach strategic management and project management actually is from Peter Drucker, who said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast every day." I think it's a great quote because it's absolutely true. I've worked for some companies that the culture got off track, and it took the company off track until that culture got fixed or something else actually broke or gave way. So it's important in BRM to establish the right culture for success, including expectations for how we would behave, how we treat each other as teammates in this environment. There needs to be a safe space for someone to kill someone else's pet project. And again, I've seen projects done that were done for the sole reason of making someone else make themselves look good. It was a waste of people resources, of that company's money, of time. Again, the sole reason was to make that person be elevated in their own sight. So BRM, to make it work right, needs to have a culture there where it's okay to say this project makes no sense whatsoever and kill it. Then following that also needs to be a culture in place to where if that person says kill that project, and that person, the messenger, is not killed also. So the idea of people can be open, honest, transparent, and not fear for their jobs, their careers by being candid in their evaluations of that project. I use the phrase here, addicted to green. I'll look at that here in just a moment. But part of this in BRM is once the project starts, once the team, the stakeholders decide that this project will meet, if it's done correctly, meet the desired and required outcome and objectives, create the right value. Once that project is adopted and started, then there needs to be a safe environment where then during that project, we can raise issues and be transparent, again, not fear retribution. And part of this is to avoid being addicted to green. So what that looks like is this. This goes back to balanced scorecards. which I think are a great tool. In my heavy industrial days, we used these religiously. We had top-down support in using these, and I think they're a great tool. Uh, at one point in my career at Alcoa, I was a production supervisor, superintendent for one of the three manufacturing silos at Alcoa's operations there in bauxite. And my job was to manage production of a refractory aggregate. And part of the process was to take alumina that we brought in from another location and ball mill that to a certain medium micron size. We decided to make that part of our balanced scorecard measurements called internal process and balanced scorecard language, and then control chart that our objective was to have our process in control and capable. And so our measurement was the medium micron output of that ball mill discharge. And we did that by control chart training and monitoring. We had our hourly employees, the operators, take samples, submit to the lab, get the lab results back, and then chart this over time. We started the year off every year by being in the red. We were not in control yet. We had to have so many weeks in control within a certain range of medium micron particle size to be in control. But the objective was to, by the second quarter, to be on our way, and by third quarter, be in the green. Now, you might be shocked to hear this, but some people would cook the books and try to appear to be in green earlier. That really was dishonest, in my opinion. But along with this idea, there was pressure from upper management to get in green because that meant we were in control. That meant we had a good process going. And we were paid. Our bonus was based in part on our balanced scorecard output. So again, there was temptation there to fudge the numbers and to get to green quicker, to be addicted to green. So an important part of BRM, once the projects start, is to be okay with the idea that maybe something is not quite working right. Something's not quite in control. Something is not quite on schedule, not quite in budget. Let's talk about, let's get it fixed. Let's get our PM to get it fixed, and let's recover and then keep on going. But don't cover the facts up. Don't be addicted to green. Some ways to jumpstart BRM are to select good project candidates. Look for projects that have a high value potential. Again, the idea is to have some quick, decisive wins using BRM to build momentum, to build acceptance, to build appreciation for the process across the organization. Going back to earlier comments I made about involving project managers, to jumpstart BRM, get the project managers involved early, let them develop good project management plans, knowing all that can be known about that project, about the value, the objective of that, and then invest in good PMs or capabilities. Now, talking about barriers to implementing BRM. Going back to my earlier comments about I skipped over a slide. My computer will not let me go backwards. So the barriers to implementing BRM are not having clear strategies. So if strategy is not understood or known, it's hard to meet that objective, right? That just makes sense. So having no clear strategy can be an impediment to implementing BRM effectively. Ineffective project management can also be a barrier in a BRM implementation. And then going back again to earlier comments, if the C-level folks are not involved, if there's not business unit leadership supporting this, it will probably not last long. It may have a little bit of momentum, but eventually it will die out and not go through. And then related to that is having enough commitment and faith in the process to see it through to the end. Like most things worthwhile, there will be some things that will pop up in BRM in that process that might be difficult for a short time, for a short season, but it's important to be committed to the process and see it through because it will succeed when done correctly. I know many of us view life through the PMI framework. So if that's kind of how you view everything, maybe asking where does this fit in the PMI framework? So this goes back to the initiating process group, the first one in the PMI process group model. So this is part of the develop process charter process. So in the initiating process group, there are two processes: identify stakeholders, develop project charter. And those two, I think, work well together in implementing a BRM plan. This is what this could look like right now. So the benefits register you see here and kind of the top left of the screen, it aggregates the benefit profiles. The benefit profiles are a description of the benefits derived from that project. And so this is just one type of format that you could use in doing this. And this all rolls into the benefits realization management plan. And that becomes, again, part of the project charter in the initiation phase of the project. Now, results of this, when it's all said and done, organizations that have a mature BRM process using this well, they are about 1.6 times as likely to achieve the project objectives. And then I think a pretty phenomenal 3 times as likely to achieve target ROI in that project. And that comes from the Boston Consulting Group. A graphic that looks at some big numbers, and this of course does not apply to every organization, but to those large organizations that their finances are looked at in billions of dollars. And so this shows that those organizations that have a high BRM maturity level, that have used the process well for a while, they tend to waste a lot less money per $1 billion spent on projects than those organizations that do not have a mature BRM process. So about $112 million savings for companies that use BRM effectively. If you want to discuss or look at this concept further, here's some documents, some of which I used to prepare this presentation today. I think the best one is the one starred there at the top of the list, and it's the PMI 2019 Benefits Realization Management Practice Guide. But all of these are good resources, and there's certainly more out there that you can look at to explore and understand more about benefits realization management. So I hope this has been helpful today. Again, an overview, a place to start with this, but a powerful concept that does work when applied correctly and can certainly make projects align with your company's strategy. So thank you for being part of today's presentation.
Well, Phil, thank you very much. That was very informative, and I learned quite a bit. I hope everyone else did too. So we're going to go ahead and start the question and answer portion with Phil. If you can utilize your chat box, we'll give folks a couple minutes to kind of formulate their questions and get those typed in. And meanwhile, we'll tell you a little bit about our program. We have a Master of Science in Operations Management. It is 100% online, or we do offer live classes. Getting a little bit out of the pandemic, we're starting to get a little bit back to normal, but not quite, I think, where we were prior to. But we are an in-state tuition for everyone, for domestic students and international students, although additional fees might apply to international students. We have 10 graduate course program, which is 30 hours total. There are up to 4 prerequisite classes that may be required. We have 5 8-week sessions per year, and you can pair a master's degree with a graduate certificate, such as project management that Phil just described, with no extra hours required. There's no GRE or GMAT required with a 3.0 bachelor's GPA, and the total program cost is anywhere between 12 to 15,000, again, depending on those prereqs I just mentioned uh, previously. We have graduate certificates. Like I said, we have the project management, which is designed to provide skills to become better project managers and prepare for the PMP certification. We also have Lean Six Sigma, where you can learn how to eliminate problems, remove waste, and reduce variation to improve operations. Last, we have our Homeland Security Certificate, which is designed for industry and safety professionals to learn how to mitigate risk. Our graduate certificates comprise of only 4 classes. You can obtain that as part of your master's degree if you are in the MSOM program um, without taking any extra classes because those are going to double count. You can also be completed as a standalone program. A 2.5 undergraduate GPA is required for admission for the graduate certificates, and there are no GRE or GMAT scores required. It is also an opportunity if you do not meet those admission requirements and are approved to be admitted with exceptions. It is a way to transition into the MSOM program without having to take the GRE and submit scores. Right now, we have a COVID-19 special announcement effective for summer and fall 2021 terms. At this time, we are waiving the GRE for all applicants with a 2.5 to 2.99 undergraduate GPA. Applicants with above a 3.0, the GRE is automatically waived for any term. Once the GRE testing centers resume full operation, the standard admission requirements will go back into full effect. Okay, well, thank you. We're going to go ahead and get back to our question and answer period with Phil here. Let me go ahead and get that chat box pulled up here. And Dr. Parnell, thank you for joining us today, our director of our programs here. Phil, Dr. Parnell says, have we incorporated BRM in our PM and advanced PM courses?
Yes, sir, we have, Dr. Parnell. So when we redeveloped the advanced PM course back in the fall, we in week 1 included a presentation much like this, except actually a little bit longer, that walks through the BRM process. Then we also have an exercise in week 1, a net present value exercise that we think does a pretty good job of making students think about, okay, here is the process to evaluate a project and does it fit the organization's strategy. In the basic project management course, when I teach it, I do introduce this in week 1, just not quite the level of depth that we do in the advanced PM course or that we did today in this presentation.
Okay, thank you, Phil.
Yes, sir.
Great. And we've got Jim Bergen on, another MSOM instructor. Welcome, Jim. Glad to have you. He says, Phil, I see tiebacks to several classes like organizing for change and quality management. Do you care to comment on how each class builds and or complements on other classes?
Well, Jim, I've not taught organizing for change or quality management in this program, but just now falling back on my experience, especially at Alcoa, obviously we run projects to make some type of change, right? To make some type of change in production or the organization structure, just somehow or the other. So I do think that aligning BRM to the change desired, the reason for change, the foundation for change could be that alignment. In quality management, I'm not really sure how to answer that question, Jim. I mean, I showed earlier how that the balanced scorecard can be a part and maybe should be a part of this process at the most granular level in this. And of course, I know at least at Alcoa anyway, our balanced scorecards also were part of our quality management process. So I think there is a connection there, maybe not quite as strong as it is for organizing for change, but I do think there's linkage there.
Phil, I don't know if you can hear me. I went ahead and unmuted myself. So
Yes, sir, I can.
Actually, the quality management side of things, certainly we talk about the balanced scorecard, but we also talk about control charts and having your line people put in the control chart information,
Yes.
making sure your process is in control. So that's a good tie back. And now I will mute myself.
Thanks, Jim. Other
Thanks.
questions, anyone?
Yeah, we'll give folks a little bit longer to type in any follow-up questions for Phil. He did provide his contact information if you'd like to follow up with him one-on-one if you have any other questions. And we'll go ahead and we'll start to wrap up. I'll continue to monitor the chat box there to see if any other questions come up. But I do want to announce that the next webinar is going to be April 14th. We're going to keep going here. We'll go through the end of May, and so we'll have 2 more to wrap up in our series. The topic is going to be on human resources and operations management. And for the first time, we're going to have kind of a co-host presentation with Jeff Bean and Travis McNeil. I know they're working hard on the presentation right now, but I don't see that we're going to have any more questions. So I want to thank Phil Jones very much for this presentation. It was very informative, and I'm sure everyone will find it useful. So Phil, thank you very much for your time. And so we do have one more question coming in. So let's back up just a second. I won't wrap up. But thank you, Dr. Parnell. Thank you, Adam, for joining us today. Thanks, Mindy, for being here. And we have a question from Gregory. It says, have you experienced any difficulties in getting buy-in to the BRM process?
Yes, I am, Greg. I have some difficulties, and in my experience, which is not completely universal, I haven't seen everything yet, but hope to someday. But what made it difficult was going back to some of those things I mentioned earlier about not having all the right people in the room at the same time the first time. Not having that PM as part of that first conversation to hear why the project's being done, the value intended to be derived from that project. So that's one barrier that I've seen. And then again, the second one, just candidly, are those egos and cultures getting in the way of this being done successfully. Either someone insisting on a project being done to support their own personal interest, or a culture in the company that does just not make it a safe place to be open and candid, which is, as you hopefully have seen today, is fundamental in making this process work.
Great. Thank you for that question, Gregory, and thank you to Phil. Well, we want to thank everyone for attending. For more information about our flexible degree options, you can email myself at my email there, the kahicken@uark.edu. You can also visit our website, operations-management.uark.edu, for more information about our programs and our coursework and our webinar series and our social media links. Registered participants will receive an email with the video link to this webinar, as well as a PDF file of the presentation. And so that will be sent out within the next 24 hours. And we want to thank everybody for being on today. Leonard, thanks for joining us today. And we hope to see everyone online next month. So we'll see you later. Thank you.